The church was full, but I had never felt so alone. My husband of 30 years lay in that coffin, and with him, the only man who had ever seen me. As people whispered condolences, I noticed their eyes weren't on me. They were on each other. They weren't wondering how I'd survived without him. They were wondering what I'd get, what part of his estate would land in my lap, what scraps they'd have to fight me for. I remember clutching my hands so tightly, my nails dug into my skin. I had given up my youth for this family, sold my jewelry to keep his business alive, spent nights at hospitals caring for his sick mother, made sure every bill was paid while others lived carelessly. And yet, standing there in my black dress, I was invisible. After the funeral, the lawyer's voice echoed in the dining hall. His words didn't sound real, almost like he was reciting someone else's story. To my sister, I leave the family house. To my nieces and nephews, I leave the investments. Line after line, names called, fortunes passed down. And then finally, to my beloved wife, Margaret, I leave my wedding ring. Gasps filled the room. Some smirked. One voice whispered, "Guess love doesn't pay, huh?" I sat frozen. My heart didn't just break that day. It turned to stone. The days after the will reading felt like a blur. I walked through the house I had called home for decades, but suddenly, every wall whispered betrayal. Every piece of furniture I polished, every photo I framed, it no longer belonged to me. According to the papers, it belonged to her. My sister-in-law, Ruth. She had always been clever with words, always hovering around, pretending to care, while quietly waiting for her moment. Now she had it. She stopped by one evening, her perfume filling the hallway before I even saw her. With that smug smile, she leaned against the doorway. "Guess love doesn't pay, huh?" she said, twirling my late husband's pen in her hand, like she already owned it all. My chest burned, but I said nothing, because deep down I remembered every sacrifice I had made, the silent ones no one ever thanked me for. I remembered selling the last piece of gold jewelry my mother left me, just so my husband could pay his employees during a rough winter. I remembered co-signing Ruth's loan when she swore she'd pay me back and never did. I remembered the nights I worked overtime to cover his medical bills while she was out traveling, bragging about her freedom. My sacrifices had been invisible, unseen, unvalued, and now erased. But here's the truth I clung to. What they didn't know, what Ruth didn't know, was that love may not pay, but paperwork always does. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ruth's words kept replaying in my mind. "You have nothing here, Margaret. This house was never yours." I sat in the dark, staring at the old study desk my husband once loved. For years, I never touched it, out of respect, out of grief, maybe even out of fear. But something inside me pushed me forward that night. I remembered the little brass key he told me about, hidden inside a chipped teacup on the top shelf. My hands shook as I found it, almost as if he had left it there for me to discover when I needed it most. When the drawer creaked open, I saw papers, dusty ledgers, sealed envelopes, and then a will. Not my husband's, his father's, and my heart froze. This will didn't leave everything to Ruth's side of the family like they always claimed. No, it said the estate belonged to my husband and his descendants. To us, to me. I dug deeper. Property deeds, bank records, even a letter warning my husband about Ruth's ambitions. All these years, they told me I was nothing, that I didn't belong here, but the truth had been sitting hidden in this drawer all along. I pressed the will against my chest, tears burning my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt something new. Not fear, not grief, resolve. And then a knock on the door. Ruth's sharp voice cut through the silence. "Margaret, what are you doing in there?" The next morning, I forced myself to act as if nothing had changed. Ruth was watching me too closely. But inside, I carried a secret that gave me strength. The will, the papers, the truth they thought would stay buried forever. That afternoon, I visited town for errands. Walking through the market, I overheard whispers. Ruth bragging to her friends about the family estate and how I was just a guest clinging to scraps. I smiled politely when I passed her, but inside I burned. If only they knew the truth I now held in my hands. Later at the bank, something strange happened. The manager greeted me warmly, too warmly. He leaned across the counter and whispered, "Mrs. Whitmore, we still have those accounts in your late husband's name. If you ever wish to review them." My heart raced. Accounts? My husband never spoke of them. I nodded calmly, pretending I knew, but inside, puzzle pieces began to connect. Ruth and her children had been digging into the estate for years, living off money that wasn't rightfully theirs. When I returned home, Ruth's son barely looked at me as he strutted out of the house in expensive shoes. I thought of the ledgers, the receipts, the truth. That night, as I sat alone in my room, I whispered to myself, "They see me as weak, as invisible, but soon they will see me for who I truly am." By the end of the week, Ruth had called a family meeting. She said it was about the estate, about responsibility. But I knew better. These meetings were never about responsibility. They were about control. I sat at the long dining table, the one I had polished for years, the one I had served countless meals upon. Now, I sat not as a servant, but as a silent witness, carrying a truth no one else suspected. Ruth began, her voice sharp and rehearsed. "This house is ours to maintain. We all need to contribute. But Margaret, well, you've lived here long enough without doing your share." My chest tightened, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Her son smirked, sliding a stack of unpaid bills across the table, as if I were the problem. Her daughter chimed in about the burden of keeping me here. Each word was like a blade, cutting away at the life I had built beside my husband. I lowered my eyes, but inside I wasn't crumbling. I was memorizing their arrogance, their greed. When Ruth slammed her hand on the table and said, "You'll need to find somewhere else, Margaret. This house was never meant for you," I finally looked up. And I smiled, just faintly, because I knew something they didn't. "You might be right," I whispered. "Perhaps this house was never meant for me, but you'll find it was never meant for you either." The room fell silent. Ruth's face flushed with confusion. Her children exchanged uneasy glances. Inside, my heart pounded like a drum, but my voice remained steady. "This ends tonight," I said softly, echoing words I wasn't sure were mine or my husband's. And for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. My hands shook slightly as I placed the heavy binder on the table. For a moment, no one breathed. Ruth leaned forward, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "What is this?" she demanded. I looked at her, not with anger, not with fear, but with the calm certainty of someone who finally has nothing to lose. "It's the truth," I said. One by one, I opened the pages. Deeds in my husband's name, bank accounts they never mentioned. The will that clearly stated, "To my son and his descendants." Each page was a dagger, and I could see the color drain from Ruth's face as she realized what I had uncovered. Her son tried to laugh it off. "These papers mean nothing," he scoffed. But his voice cracked. "Nothing? I asked quietly. Then why have you been living off them for years? Why hide them if they meant nothing? I turned the page again, this time to the letter. My husband's father, warning him about Ruth's ambitions. The room fell deathly silent. Ruth slammed her fist against the table. You don't understand. This family, this estate, belongs to us. I leaned forward, my voice steady and sharp. No, Ruth. It belonged to my husband, and by law and by blood it belongs to me. Her children began shouting, but their noise only made my voice stronger in contrast. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I looked at all of them, one by one. You've treated me like a guest in my own home, like a servant. But I was the keeper of this family long before you claimed it. And now, I am its guardian of truth. Ruth stood, her chair screeching back. Her face was red with fury. You'll regret this, Margaret. You'll regret ever opening that drawer. I closed the binder slowly, my heart pounding, but my voice unwavering. No, I whispered. The only regret here is yours. After that night, the house was no longer the same. Ruth avoided me, slamming doors, whispering behind my back, her anger seeping through every hallway. Her children glared when they passed me, but they no longer dared to speak with the same arrogance. Yet it wasn't just hostility I began to notice. There were glimmers, small, almost hidden, of support. My husband's cousin, Dorothy, knocked gently on my door one evening. She had always been quiet, staying out of family disputes, but now her eyes brimmed with something I hadn't seen in a long time: kindness. You're not wrong, Margaret, she whispered, pressing my hand in hers. You've carried them for too long. It's about time someone reminded Ruth this family wasn't hers to rule. Her words sank into me like warmth after a long winter. For so many years, I had fought my battles alone. But in that moment, I realized the truth was beginning to shift more than just papers. It was shifting people. Still, guilt lingered in my heart. I heard Ruth crying late at night in her room, loud enough for me to know, quiet enough for me to almost pity her. Almost. But every time doubt crept in, I returned to the binder. I would lay it out on my lap, fingertips tracing the pages of proof. It grounded me. It reminded me. One night, as I was putting it away, an email notification flashed across my phone. It was from a solicitor I had quietly contacted days before. Townhouse available. Keys ready if you wish to proceed. My chest tightened. A new place. My sanctuary. My escape. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, torn between fear of leaving the only home I had known for decades and the promise of peace that awaited me if I stepped beyond Ruth's shadow. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a life where I wasn't a burden, wasn't invisible, wasn't trapped. And that thought felt like freedom. Word travels fast in this family. Too fast. I hadn't spoken a word out the townhouse to anyone, yet Ruth somehow knew. Perhaps she had seen the email on my phone, or maybe one of the children had been snooping again. Either way, the silence in the house turned heavier, colder. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Ruth waiting, arms crossed, lips pursed. Her son sat at the table, smirking, while her daughter pretended not to listen. So, Ruth began, her voice sharp as glass, you think you can just walk out? After everything this family has done for you? After we gave you a home when you had nothing? Her words struck me, but this time they didn't pierce. They bounced off the armor I had been quietly building. I set my teacup down slowly. A home, Ruth? Or a cage? The smirk on her son's face faltered. Ruth's daughter shifted uncomfortably. Ruth, however, only leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You leave, Margaret, and you'll regret it. You'll have no one left. Do you really think this family will forgive you? You'll die alone." For years, that fear had bound me in place. The fear of being unloved, unwanted, alone. But now, hearing her say it aloud, I felt something break, not in me, but in her. I rose from my chair, calm and deliberate. I'd rather be alone in peace than surrounded by people who feed on me like parasites. Her children gasped, Ruth's face twisted with fury. But before she could reply, I picked up my phone and opened the solicitor's email again. I let the bright screen reflect in my eyes as I said, "The keys will be in my hand next week. Nothing you say can stop that." The room went silent. Even Ruth had no quick reply. Inside, my heart thundered, but I didn't let them see. I walked out of the kitchen, each step steady, leaving behind the tension and the threats. For the first time in decades, I was no longer reacting to their rules. I was writing my own. The day I held the keys in my hand, they felt heavier than gold. My fingers trembled as I slid one into the lock of the townhouse. The door creaked open, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't stepping into someone else's domain. I was stepping into mine. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floors, untouched, unspoiled, no voices shouting, no demands waiting, just silence, a silence that belonged to me. I wandered room to room, my footsteps echoing. Each space whispered freedom. The kitchen wasn't cluttered with resentment. The living room wasn't a battlefield of control. Here, I could breathe. I set down a single box on the counter. Inside were only the essentials: a framed photo of my late husband, a worn teapot, and a binder labeled proof. I didn't need much to start over. Only truth, memory, and resolve. That evening, I sat on the balcony, sipping tea as dusk painted the sky. For the first time in years, I smiled without guilt. My heart didn't race with fear of Ruth's voice calling me downstairs. My phone lay silent on the table beside me. But I knew it wouldn't stay silent for long. They had called every day since I left, each message dripping with false concern and hidden threats. I hadn't answered a single one. Still, as I watched the city lights flicker alive, I couldn't help but wonder, how long before Ruth came knocking at this very door? And when she did, would I have the strength to keep it closed? It felt strange, setting the table in my own dining room. The plates gleamed under the chandelier, the silverware perfectly placed. For once, I wasn't preparing for them out of duty. This dinner was on my terms. When the doorbell rang, I knew it was them. Ruth walked in first, her perfume sharp, her smile sharper. Her children trailed behind, eyes darting around, as if measuring what they might claim. We sat. Silence stretched across the table, thicker than the roast in the oven. Finally, Ruth spoke. "Margaret, you can't keep shutting us out. Family sticks together. It's time you come back and do what's right." Her words dripped with entitlement, the same old script. But this time, I didn't flinch. I reached under my chair and placed the binder on the table. Proof. Its weight shook the glasses. Page after page slid across to them. Receipts, transfers, bailouts. Years of my life reduced to ink and numbers. "You say I owe this family?" I whispered. "No, this family has been living off me like a parasite. And tonight, it ends." Ruth's smile cracked, her voice rising, desperate. "You're tearing this family apart." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "No, Ruth, I'm saving myself from being torn apart." The children said nothing. For once, they saw me, not as the quiet widow, not as the easy target, but as the woman who had carried them all and finally put the weight down. Dinner ended without a bite. They left in silence, their shadows retreating down my walkway. I didn't chase after them. Later, I sat alone at the table, a cup of tea warming my hands. The binder lay closed beside me. I no longer needed it to prove my worth. I had spoken it aloud. For years, I lived in a house where my voice was drowned out. But here, in my home, my silence means peace, not fear. And for the first time in my life, I realized I am free.